And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Business Focus Live with me, John, where we talk about business related topics as well as news from here and around the world. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and let's get started. And we're back. Thank you again for joining me today. In this week's episode, we'll be talking about Spider-Man's recent release of their trailer, Spider-Man No Way Home. It's very interesting. Actually, I'm excited to see this film later this year. What's interesting, another film that's going to be simultaneously released around December is the muchly anticipated Matrix 4 Resurrection, which I think they just recently released a teaser trailer for that one. Anyway, next we'll be talking about the Joe Rogan's move from YouTube platform to switching to Spotify, and he was paid a handsome amount in the amount of $100 million. Was it worth it? Well, I think Spotify is saying it's a worthwhile investment here. Then next, we'll be talking about gaming with regards to if you're familiar with the World of Warship game. Actually, I only know of this game when I was watching a YouTuber by the name of Jace2Sen, who's very fond of this game. And the issue with loot boxes strikes again, similar to how EA uses that microtransaction strategy. Next is we'll be talking about the latest concerns regarding the PS5 release or the updated version. I won't say updated version, but the re-release of the PS5 console, and there were concerns that it was hotter than usual. So we'll take a closer look at that one. And next is we have Xiaomi's venture into the electric vehicle market here. So that was a surprise. And finally, for some local news so regards to our restaurants in the country, how are they coping with the pandemic that's still ongoing? The on and off again relationship with our government, with the IATF, with regards to are they allowed to take in customers and up to how much, and how is this going to affect the industry as a whole? So stay tuned for that one. Anyway, so to start off, as I mentioned, so you know, I'm a movie buff as much as a next person here. But the problem here in our country, we still haven't had the luxury of being able to watch films in movie theaters. That's why other film studios like Disney, Paramount, NBC is trying to use their streaming services as a viable alternative. But anyway, in the United States, in particular, there's been hotly contested issue with regards to what happened with the Black Widow film, and then now the recent launch of what do you call this? Launch of Shang-Chi, which is doing well for its first week, but what happens in the succeeding weeks, still have to wait and see. But nonetheless, people is clamoring for entertainment, and none best than watching films in the big screen experience here. And the recent trailer release for Spider-Man 3 couldn't come soon enough, which sad to say there was a leak that was posted before, and this has pushed the timeline for Sony to release its actual trailer for the Spider-Man 3 No Way Home. Anyway, according to CNET.com, the Spider-Man 3 No Way Home drops a very insane trailer wherein it introduces several familiar characters from previous iterations of the film, since the concept of the film is going to introduce the multiverse in a sense, so introducing different versions of the Spider-Man franchise from the past to what's being presented now in the current iteration here. So the multiverse is what's being pegged here, and what's the interesting part here is who are the new characters that's going to be introduced now. There were mentions regarding the Sinister Six was going to be included here. There were talks about it. Not sorry, talks, but the character Vulture was introduced in the first Spider-Man here, and then there were mentions of now Doc Octopus. And obviously, Doc Octopus was already presented in the first iteration of the Spider-Man franchise, wherein Alfred Molina donned the character here. And then there were speculations, not just speculations, there were teasers of the Green Goblin if you were to see the trailer. And you saw there were mentions, could be Electro and Sandman, and even the Lizard could be included here. And obviously, the story continues of what happened apart from the No Way Away from Home from Spider-Man 2. So let's take a peek in the trailer here. I think they have it there. There you go. So it continues with what's been happening
Oh, look at this. This is a good one. Some suggest
from
that
the
Parker's
previous
powers
film
protect Spider's
wherein
ability to
the
hypnotize
world
any
discovered the secret identity of Spider-Man, and how will it pan out in the next iteration here. And now let's get to the more interesting part.
So, Peter,
So obviously his dilemma, he goes to Doctor Strange to ask for his help to change the timeline here, so to speak.
Steven.
But obviously changing timeline, there's always repercussion, you know. So question is what will happen there.
My entire life got screwed up.
And this brings about a lot of interesting scenarios here, and obviously not just the insane multiverse converging here, but the new characters that's going to be presented here is going to be tremendous. I think it's exciting. I mean, obviously knowing the Spider-Man character as it is right now, and you can see here the Green Goblin's signature weapon here, and then tada, we have Mr. Doc Ock himself, and
Hello, Peter.
and then that's it. So you can just imagine the anticipation for many moviegoers who were expecting to be able to watch the film. Hopefully by December, a lot more people can see the films now, or more films in that case. Actually, there's another bigger issue that's not being mentioned or talked about as much, because what happens in the third iteration here? Will there be a continuation of the partnership between Sony and Marvel Studios here, or will it conclude? Now, obviously, for Marvel fans, they would like it to continue with the Avengers Phase 4, Phase 4. But for Sony, there's no incentive, because on its own, the brand for the Spider-Man character as a single character has been doing well for them for several years. When you think about when Tobey Maguire donned the suit, and then you have Andrew Garfield who continued that to some fanfare, but still got two films out of that, and now you have Tom Holland, and now they're trying to merge the characters of Spider-Man, Venom, even Carnage, the Sinister Six, and on and on and on. And it makes a compelling case for Sony not to continue what they were have started out. And actually, in the game of Spider-Man, I think they just introduced a trailer from the Sony presentation recently, the Spider-Man sequel, not the Miles Morales one. They're introducing the character of not Carnage, yeah, Venom, the main antagonist here. So looks for an interesting case here. So the game, as well as the film, it's being tied up in a sense, so that it makes a more compelling case for people to watch the film, to actually play the game simultaneously, which is, I think, a great strategy for Sony here. And obviously, the question here is, will it be as successful as its previous iteration before the lockdown here? Only time will tell, because based on what's happened in the past with the release of what do you call this, the Black Widow film, and then Shang-Chi, we will see how those films will fare eventually. But so far for Black Widow, it hasn't reached even the 500 million mark, which is another discussion altogether, which I'll discuss in our business update. And then for Shang-Chi, it's looking promising here for domestic box office in the United States. But the question is, will it do well in other parts of the world, and in particular in China, wherein will it be released there? Will it be allowed to be shown for the China consumers to watch the content, so that it generates a lot of revenue for the movie studios here? And only time can tell how will it perform in the long run. It's still early, but going back to the film of Spider-Man, I'm looking forward to how it's going to be actually, you know, being able to watch it in the cinemas in in the coming months here. Anyway, next we have here with regards to what do you call this? The Spotify deal with Mr. Joe Rogan here, whether it was a worth it partnership between the two here, and according to BusinessInsider.com, you can see that paying $100 million for a podcast brand may seem a lot of money, but based on the earnings or the followers that it have garnered, obviously it boosted Spotify's presence in the streaming services as mentioned, or in the music stream as well. And the Joe Rogan Experience, which accounted almost 4.5% for all podcasting listening on Spotify in 2020 of September last year. So obviously, I'm a big fan of the show, but I only got introduced from last year by watching his catalog of interviews on YouTube, which was kind of interesting, especially the long format that he's introduced here. Talking upon hours of discussion here about, depending on the guest that he has, whether it be not necessarily a movie star, but could be any person that is of interest to him, and he gets to interview those people and share their experience. I think one of the benefits of watching his show was I was introduced to the name of Mr. Jordan Peterson, which is kind of interesting. And then there were other. I think there was a Navy SEAL, former Navy SEAL, who swam, had the world record for swimming for I don't know how many days he did it. I think it's called instead of a marathon for running, but marathon for swimming here, wherein you got it out, and and he goes on to interview a lot more people than not just the big stars in Hollywood here. And what's interesting, it attracted a lot of global users here. So it's not just in the United States, but worldwide. Obviously, for Spotify trying to gain traction here in a very competitive environment, you have Apple offering music streams, and then people have alternatives not just to listening to music or to podcasts. You have streaming videos or even movies or TV series here. Obviously, getting a very popular show at the time in YouTube, it's a great deal for them, and it has been the number one show on their services, according to the internal document here. So let's see the data here. Where was it? There we go. Let's see here. There you go. So as you can see here, that the numbers don't lie. So you can see here JRE, or Joe Rogan Experience, has the highest number of consumption hours, behind only to, what's the other one? Parcast, which is only around 7 hours. So that's double the amount for Joe Rogan, and you can see here the consumption hours here per month is significantly higher, almost 10 hours. So there's a lot of people listening to his podcast because obviously the behavior or preferences of individuals have shifted, especially being stuck at home for most of the time and doing a lot of activities at home. You need something to keep you distracted, in a sense, like music playing behind the background while doing your normal chores here. And in this case, listening to podcasts used to be when you're traveling on your car to and from work, or going other places where it normally takes hours. Then it serves the same purpose here. And obviously, a lot of people are taking advantage of their free time here, so that you can enjoy their content here. And obviously, for many followers here, even I was disappointed that they're going to remove all of their catalogs eventually, to from YouTube, going to Spotify here. That's why I haven't been watching any of his interviews lately here, which I highly appreciate. At the time that I was able to watch a lot of his interviews at the time, which got me the idea to do a sort of podcast in a sense, like what I'm doing now. So it's all thanks to him. So it gave me idea to share what I know and what I can discuss, or what is relevant at the time, so people could always go back and listen to it, and hopefully get some sort of enjoyment or entertainment value, so to speak. And and from his background alone, it was quite interesting for him to be a host or having a podcast. The fact that he's a former UFC, still a UFC commentator, and then a comedian by profession. And then he was the host, if you're familiar with his TV show Fear Factor, which was synonymous to him attached to it. So he has a lot of experience being a host, doing a lot of what he's doing now, which made sense, obviously, instead of changing career, but shifting to a different platform, but doing the same things, what he has been doing for several years or decades here. And good for him that he's doing really well here. Now, there has been mentioned that since moving to Spotify here, there were, I won't say issues regarding the company, regarding Spotify's, with his controversial topics that he engages, uh, depending on the person he's interviewing at the time. But at the end of the day, is it beneficial for him? Because listenership dropped initially because of the changing platform, which is understandable. But eventually, as people got used to the shift, there were mentions that guests receive after appearing on the show, and concluded the Rogan's influence has dwindled slightly since his Spotify exclusivity took effect. Obviously, like I'm sure there are many more cases like I have, that have been used to using YouTube as the main platform, and then if someone leaves, not everyone follows him, but still, still a lot of people who do, support him, and went on to, subscribe and pay the subscription fee for Spotify here, which is, still doing tremendous here compared to the other platforms. And obviously for him, to maximize his leverage of, earning a substantial paycheck here, kudos for him. Question is, who will be the next up and coming Joe Rogan podcaster? That's why you're seeing a lot of people going into that realm, but none has come, to take his mantle, so to speak here. So, congrats to him, and hopefully, after, I think the contract for his partnership is only for 5 years, I think, or 4 years. I'm not sure. So it would be interesting to see what he plans to do after that. Will he re-up and get another 100 million for the next 5 years, and so forth? So only time can tell. Anyway, next we have here in terms of gaming. So if you're familiar with the World of Warships, I'm not very familiar in a sense, but I've heard of the game, and I've seen one of the big YouTubers here. We have Jace2Sen. In his channel, he endorses the company here, and he actually plays the game, and is very into it. Anyway, and then this got my attention when the article at GameIndustry.biz mentions that, what was it? That the World of Warships contributors quit the game over loot boxes, which is another issue again. So for those who are not familiar, loot boxes is a game mechanic of sorts, so that people could, what do you call this, could skip the process of grinding it out, and automatically get certain items or upgrades, so to speak, so that you can breeze through the game. And it's one thing to pay for it for an item that you know what you're getting. It's another that it's a surprise mechanic of sorts, so you don't know what you're getting, and you'll be obligated, you'll be hooked in a sense of keep on paying and paying the same amount, so that hoping that you can get the item that you're looking for, similar to how EA is doing with their FIFA franchise, FIFA game here, with the Ultimate Team 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 concept there. And obviously the main problem here is, and it's geared towards to young adults, especially for minors here. If minors were involved here, that's where I bring issue to this one, because unless government steps in and ensures or protects the interests of the individuals, because as of right now, many of the games that has game mechanics or loot boxes here are still considered uh, anyone could play the game here. But anyway, going back to the article here, according to those monetary concerns, so obviously this has impacted the gaming community, in particular to the world of Warships, who supports for a game to last long. It's not just the players who play it, but the community that supports it and extends the longevity of the gaming community here. And without it, then typically a game will falter and fewer people will support it or even play the game here. But the issue here is the change of an in-game item from, instead of a one-time purchase, as I mentioned earlier, to a randomized reward, and obviously just to earn an extra buck here, which is not a recipe for success. Thank you for EA for doing this. So initially, if you they released the USS Missouri battleship, so you could buy it or originally, but now you have to use the game mechanics so you can avail it. And obviously, many of the content creators as well as contributors are appalled with what's happening here, and in protest they quit the game, which is their right to. And obviously, if the game contributors or creators are going to leave the game, similar to what's happening with I think with other FIFA games. Well, only time will tell. But for the company, according to Charlton, stating that playing not the company, one of the content creators, streamer Flambus, named Charlie. Oh, no, Paul Charlton of Mighty Jingles. Sorry. Anyway, and Charlton goes on to mention that playing the game has become toxic in the last few years, and goes on to say that increasingly aggressive monetization and implementation of gambling mechanics into a game marketed to children as young as the age of 7 here, which is the main issue that I have here. If it were adults that they're targeting, I have no problem. But obviously, they know, based on their data, and obviously other companies are taking advantage, that obviously you want to target those vulnerable young children that doesn't know the responsibility. And obviously they don't have the money, and they use the money of their parents to spend on those items, and there's no warning, so to speak, and there's no repercussion, similar to, let's say, cigarette smoking is dangerous to your health. There's a clear statement there that it's hazardous to your health. And but in case of games, that it's a surprise mechanic, so it's not technically gambling, but it is gambling based on other studies already, which has been proven. So unless the government steps in and change this policy or make it a violation, then companies will always try to eke out or find loopholes and trying to leverage this, whether it's EA or in this case for World of Warship here, which is kind of disappointing here. Anyway, and but what's interesting, according to the developer Wargaming, who developed the game, they mentioned that they understand that there are several causes that have led us to this situation. Well, obviously, money is the main driver here, because you wouldn't have pushed this aggressive monetization if money was not the main driver there. And he goes on to say that we have upset and disappointed many. Well, disappointed, I think, is to say the least here, because you betrayed the trust. Because if CD Projekt Red were to do this in what do you call this, they were to do this in their Cyberpunk 2077, people would have been in up arms here with regards to the issue here. So it's going to be problematic here. Wait. Hello. Wait. Anyway, so my issue here is make it fair for everyone, and has to be at least 18, an adult who should be using it. Because if an adult decides to purchase this monetization loot boxes type, then it's their responsibility, not the companies anymore, because it's for adult. But if it's below that, they're still kids, they're still children, then it's a totally different aspect here, which is I'm totally against with. So unless more people speak up about this issue, other games will follow suit, because they see, ooh, FIFA is doing this now, Wargaming is doing this, and then more and more gaming publishers will continue to do this, and and destroy the credibility of their gaming community. Well, unless people stop playing those games, then companies will stop behaving badly in this way. Anyway, continuing with the gaming aspect, the recently, I won't say relaunched, but the PS5 console has been short of supply recently. But the what do you call this? But the recent release of the PS5 were concerns of, according to a YouTuber from Austin Evans, where he mentions that the cooling could be a significant issue here, which got me concerned also. So let's see here. Yes, that the cooling could significantly hamper the performance of the PlayStation console here. And according to NME.com, it mentions that could be worse, but obviously looks can be deceiving here. Now, obviously, did Sony change any of the components there to significantly hamper the console here? Because obviously there have been many issues in their previous iteration of the other consoles or earlier consoles about heating issue, and obviously heat is a main antagonist for the console's longevity here with regards to the CPU and then the GPU as well here. So if heat is not properly managed, then the red light of death, if you recall, in not just in the PlayStation as well as the Xbox, if that were to happen here, obviously we don't want to have that repeat incident again here. But as I mentioned, the YouTuber Austin Evans did I would say a thorough dissection of the console here, but he did, mention that also. But he tried to measure the heat that's being expelled in the console, which was a few degrees higher, which is not terribly bad. But once he opened up the console, he goes on to mention that there were changes made in the heat sink there, which was made smaller here. So the question here is, did it hamper or made it worse in terms of performance, which is what we're here all about, right? Because no matter what Sony tells us here at the end of the day, because if it makes the console perform much worse, then it could be a severe impact in the longevity, especially with the latest technology with the SSDs here. So you're paying a lot of money for those technology, and then if it's not going to last a few years or even decades here, could be quite concerning here. And obviously he goes on to mention regarding the reworked fan and the cooling system. So it's, I won't say you should be totally concerned, but it's also to point it out that for companies trying to change the internal components of any devices here, it's important that you communicate it with your consumers here, that did it change the performance, or is it still, or is it even better? So I think that's what's lacking in the communication here. And according to Tech USA Review. I forgot his channel. Anyway, he mentions that there were actual testing that was done that said that either it was similar to the previous original launch of the PS5 console, or it was even better on some aspects with the SoC chip here. So actually there was no concerns to begin with here, which is it's fair enough for many people to obviously cast doubt where companies have made mistakes from the past. So obviously as a consumer, one has to be aware and always keep them on their toes, so that they don't you know try to deceive their consumers, which they have done in past. So obviously we have the right to be vocal about it, so to speak. And obviously the end of the day here is, if try to cut costs there, and then the performance worsens, then that's the onus on Sony here. But if that's the case, that if the performance is similar or even better, then they should market it as is and never be afraid, because obviously the demand for supply or chips here is in limited supply. So obviously Sony has to make changes or adjustments with regards to their current console here. And obviously the article even goes on to say that they've been selling the consoles for loss year. Well, that's not our problem here, right? Because they're trying to get our patronage here. And actually being anti-consumer is another issue altogether for Sony here, apart from the console, wherein you're supposed to charge. instead of free upgrade from your PS4 console to your PS5, the fact that you've already bought their consoles from the earlier generation to the current one, you don't even reward us by giving a free upgrade similar to how Xbox is doing it. If Xbox can do it, why can't Sony do that as well? And obviously, which goes back to the money issue here, which is their primary objective. They could have simply said, with the backlash on the Forbidden West, right? They promised that they would give a free upgrade, but lo and behold, they changed their mind, and they thought they could get away with it, but they had, had backlash from their community that there were proven actual statements that you said on your website that you're going to provide a free upgrade. My thinking there is that they want you to ditch your physical unit or copy and purchase the digital purchase. That's why they set it up the way it is. But that's a different discussion. Anyway, so at the end, did Austin Evans made a mistake here? Could be, but at the end of the day, getting awareness from companies like Sony or even Microsoft or even Nintendo, they do make mistakes from time to time, and we need to keep them on their toes, I think, so that they'll be upfront and make sure that they're pro-consumer rather than anti-consumer, which is a dangerous slope that many of the companies are playing here. Next, we have here company of Xiaomi, which is interesting, right? Number 2 seller of smartphones around the world, which has topped Apple here, but obviously Xiaomi's target market is totally different from Apple here. But what's interesting here, according to Reuters.com, their venture to other industries got me interested here, and they're planning to go into the EV market similar to how Tesla or even Apple is planning, a smartphone maker venturing into to electric vehicle here. And according to Reuters here, they mentioned that the Xiaomi Corporation has officially registered their electric vehicle unit. To push its automotive sector here, which is obviously it's not as easy as it looks. You can just take a look at how Tesla is doing here, even if they're the pioneers of the electric vehicle here, being able to develop the Tesla Model 3, Model Y, and then going to the Tesla Plaid. The question here is obviously producing an actual vehicle, an electric vehicle, is a daunting task because there are several limitations still. The battery capacity, the mileage, and the charging, which we have discussed in previous live stream, wherein the battery could catch fire, and in some instances, while charging at home, the fire, the house went ablaze because of some problems, technicalities here, and it's still a growing pain, so to speak. But nonetheless, companies like Xiaomi is thinking, like the CEO, according to Lei Jun, mentions that they have already employed as much as 300 employees for that department, so for the EV unit, and they're continuing to recruit more people to grow the. My question is, how are they going to build a car if they're going to follow the footprint of how Apple did their business, is partnering with other existing manufacturers, which is I think the best bet, and then using their technology in their smartphone division to integrate in their automotive, I think would be tremendous here. But the problem is, if they're not just pushing for the EV concept, but also the what do you call this, the autopilot feature or autonomous driving capability, which is a more daunting task here, which we have to wait and see if they can do the same here. And according to the CEO, he goes on to mention that this is their last major entrepreneurial project. I won't hold him to that, but obviously venturing into other industries, similar to what they're doing now, is an important aspect here. So the question here is, actually, I stand corrected. They will push for autonomous vehicle technology here by actually acquiring a startup company, the name of Deep Motion, in the sum of $77 million to boost its research and development. So similar to what other companies like Hyundai, which acquired Boston Dynamic, which is known for Spot the Dog. Then you have Atlas, the dancing acrobatic machine that uses AI to be able to power a machine and mimic human motions here. And can it be translated to a vehicle here? Would be interesting to see here. Anyway, lastly, for our last story, speaking of local news, now uh, many of our businesses here are still suffering, right? Trying to eat by, trying to survive here. But the question here is, what can the government do here? And according to Philstar.com, the what do you call this? The writer here mentions that a distress call to the IATF, which is in charge of designating what status that the cities here or the country is, in particular in the different regions, different areas here. And and he goes on to say that the Restaurant Owners of the Philippines, Association of the Philippines, or Resto PH, the situation is much worse for the restaurant industries, in particular, obviously, with the ongoing lockdown, limitations of how many customers are allowed to eat in the venue, and then only allowing for takeouts here. Now, some would say, is it fair because other businesses, other industries are allowed to resume their operations, but having to follow strict protocols to ensure the safety here? So obviously, this has obviously pushed to the breaking point of many restaurants. Obviously, bigger businesses can withstand, well, not totally withstand it, but last longer than small businesses. And in particular, in our country, majority of our businesses nationwide are comprised of micro, small, medium enterprises here. And without any financial support from the government, without any support for our employees here, like the stimulus package, like what's happening in the United States, we are left to fend for ourselves. And obviously, it seems that it's unfair. That why is it that the brand is the restaurants themselves are being targeted, that they have to limit their number of consumers here that are allowed to eat here. And obviously it has significant impact, that to the point of financial loss. Obviously cash reserves have been depleted, or already used up, and to the point of closing businesses. And then obviously employees have to be let go and are jobless, so doesn't bode well for our industry. So we need to uh, stay glued with the situation and find ways to solve this, either manage the spread of the virus, or allow businesses to resume operations, but with restrictions or protocols that would make some sense here. Otherwise, it doesn't benefit any of us, whether you're a citizen, a business, or even the government here. And they go on to say that they've been discriminated against by the IATF. Why restaurants are prohibited from dining operations under MECQ restrictions. Well, actually, we're now in GCQ, right? And then while other offices, factories, BPOs, construction sites, seaports, airports, and government offices and public markets are allowed, right? Obviously, restaurants are still a basic necessity because they provide food for our citizens here. And obviously, the risk of spreading the virus would be similar, or would it be worse or better? But the question here is, it should be equal footing for all industries here. And obviously, the IATF assumes that takeout sales are sufficient, which is obviously it's not enough. I mean, can supplement the business, but it cannot be the main source, because it's still a different experience of eating food, dining experience, versus just takeout here. And obviously, if you're going to use takeout, then they have other more options other than, let's say, I want to go to my favorite restaurant, whether it's Aristocrat, Max's restaurant, Shakey's, or whatever restaurant it is. Then obviously it will cut in their what do you call this, cut to their revenue. And obviously, for many physical stores there, they have to pay rent, salaries. That's still ongoing, unless landlords will give them a tax break, which the government should have pushed in the first place, and maybe tax break for this year and so forth. And again, it goes on to where they mentioned that not everyone is like Jollibee, that can withstand this difficulty here. And obviously, the main issue that they're stating here is, if government were to provide financial relief, I think that would have alleviate some of the concerns here. And not just that, but also, if businesses need to borrow money, that the banks will allow them, even though uh, BSP Governor Mr. Diokno stated that banks are extending relief. Obviously, there's no incentive for the banks to do that, because if those business borrow money and then they cannot repay their debts, then unless the government instructs the banks that they should allow them to borrow money, let's say 1 million or whatever the amount that's necessary for them to stay afloat within at least the current year, calendar year. And obviously, some even banks are even doing the opposite. Instead of helping out those businesses, they've even called on their loans which were not yet due and accelerated payment schedules because they are concerned that the businesses may not be here in the near future, which is, you know fending businesses fending for themselves is not, you know the term is for survival of the fittest here. So meaning the government is not doing any what do you call this, any favors for our businesses here, so that we need to find ways to be able to support our business. Even if I want to eat at all of those establishments, but if I'm restricted to move out and only I can eat it, not my family or the rest of the family or everyone else, then obviously it's not going to be a sustainable solution here, no matter what you look at it. And according to the organization Resto PH, they're going to say that, they only have two requests, sorry, three requests. That the first is they should be allowed to accommodate vaccinated individuals, which is a difficult thing to know. How would you know if they're vaccinated or not? That's why managing the spread of the virus is important, so that people, some normalcy could resume in a sense. They're asking for at least 50% capacity so that they can maintain their profitability there. Then second is that malls, retail shops should be allowed to serve vaccinated individuals, similar to what was mentioned earlier. And third, that government should provide some sort of financial relief to those businesses, as I mentioned earlier, which is, I think, a big deal, because the taxes that been levied upon those businesses should come back to them, so that they could still be there by next year and the years to come, so that they could repay those taxes, so that everyone wins. The business are still there, people are still employed, government gets their taxes in the long run rather than the short run here. And until that happens, many of the business will continue to suffer and at worst shut down if this is not taken care of here. And obviously, I want everyone to benefit here. As a consumer, I want businesses to be there. Don't want business closing up shop just because they can sustain it. And many have already closed. And obviously, there are many opportunities for others to start up a business. But obviously, the government should do their part. Yeah, actually, yeah, so some big restaurants also yeah, actually that's right. That's why the takeouts are not enough to support the businesses here. That's why in the article they're going to mention that they need people to eat in the restaurant, unless your business is primarily takeouts, right? But if you have a physical store that you need to have dine-in guests here, which is, a big problematic here. And big franchises can sustain it, but not indefinitely as well. And what if this were to continue until next year or even the year after that? So you could just imagine the turmoil that many businesses are going through right now, which is, I commend them from struggling to be able to sustain themselves, but we need to find solutions that can have an impact right away, and not just in the short run, but also in the long run as well. That's why we need to spread the word that, we have problems and we need solutions now from everyone here, whether on the private sector or as well as in the government sectors here. Anyway, that concludes our discussion for today. Anyway, if you're interested in checking out the full article, I leave the link in the description below. So thanks for watching again. For more business news, stay here at Business Focus Live. Or you can check out my other videos or other segments. We have Business Update, which is on every Wednesdays. Or you can check out guides, tutorials, and tips for business tutorials there. And also, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you enjoy these types of content. As always, I'll see you in the next one. Same bad time. Corny. Same bad channel. Take care.